Before I was ever a researcher or a college professor, I was an elementary school teacher. And I say that with pride. I was an elementary school teacher. And I was teaching in what many would call an underperforming school, filled with black and brown faces. And I had a connection to my students, a rich connection. And I thought that connection had everything to do with skin color. Until I realized and dug a little bit deeper to find out that that connection was hip hop. And this connection that I had with my students was not just the music of hip hop, it was the culture of hip hop. And I saw my students do amazing and incredible things in the classroom, strictly bringing their culture into the classroom. And to many people, the outside person would look at my classroom and say, there's no learning going on there. It is loud. It is not academic. And I saw it as organized noise. I saw it as kids using everything that they had to learn. So what do I mean by that? I'm sure many of you, if you're a teacher, you have walked into a classroom, especially with students who identify with hip hop culture, and they are banging away on a table, just banging. And you ask a child, could you please stop? And they look at you like, I'm not banging on the table. And so then you're having this moment to yourself saying, I just saw you bang on the table. And then 5 seconds later, they're banging on the table again. But what they're doing, they're drumming. They are honing in on their African and African American spirit. Or you have seen a child walking down the street with no headphones on, bobbing like this, talking to themselves. And you're thinking to yourself, is this child crazy? But what they're actually doing is they're a soundtrack playing in their bodies. And they are responding to that soundtrack. So when I was in my classroom, I saw students construct masterful narratives using rap, using poetry. I saw young girls use their entire body to learn and see knowledge as an embodied practice. And so what I was seeing in the classroom is that, yes, my students were learning differently. And there are many, many educators who have said this. Yes, some of these students do learn differently, but that does not mean they are deficient. That does not mean they are deficient. And these experiences brought me out of the classroom into a PhD program. Because I was thinking to myself, okay, how can I do this over and over again? How can I make this happen? How can I scale this? How can I have students be in hip hop culture, identify with hip hop, and they are in every classroom, everywhere? So I had big goals. Hip hop everywhere. But what I learned is that my students weren't just doing hip hop. They were actually participating in their cultural DNA, or what Malcolm Gladwell would call their cultural legacy. That the traditions and the customs of hip hop are actually African and African American customs. And that hip hop, when you see hip hop, it is the latest iteration of Black genius. It is the newest thing of what you see of people creating a culture out of nothing. But it isn't nothing. It goes back generations and generations. So my students, they don't even know it, but they are tapping into their cultural legacy to learn. And so if they have a cultural legacy, if this is Black genius, and if they have a way of being, then they have what scholar Regina Bradley calls hip-hop sensibilities. And that is a way of knowing, a way of being, a way of thinking. And I wanted to argue today that those hip-hop sensibilities are directly linked to predictors of success. So there's fascinating work right now from people like Angela Duckworth, Tony Wagner, Paul Tough, about what they call character strengths or mindsets. And I think this research is really fascinating about our grittiest kids, kids who have social and emotional intelligence, and how they're able to achieve. And these are some of these predictors of success. And when I look at this list, social and emotional intelligence, the ability to improv, curiosity, optimism, grit, I look at this list and I say, oh, that's hip hop. Is that how we're going to measure success? Because if that's how we're going to measure success, oh, I got some people for you. I got some kids for you. Let's think about this. hip hop. And let me back a little bit. I'm not just talking about kids who listen to the radio, right? Because the radio plays the same 25 songs over and over again. So we all know if we get in our car at 8 a.m., 3 a.m., 5, and 11, the same song is on. I'm not talking about that hip hop. I am talking about the hip hop that is ingenious. I am talking about the students with no formal musical training, no computer programming, and they make unbelievable music. I am talking about the kids who will find the latest song from somebody that is so underground and make it the best thing since sliced bread. I am talking about the kids whose movements today will become mainstream tomorrow. Those are the kids who identify with hip hop. They live it, they breathe it. This is how they see the world. And if that is true, and if they see the world through hip hop, that means they have hip hop sensibilities. And I want to argue today that those hip hop sensibilities are directly linked to character strengths. So I like to call them cultural strengths. So let's start with the first one, social and emotional intelligence. If you've ever gone to a hip hop cypher, you have kids all in a circle, and they could be freestyle rapping, they could be battling, they could be dancing. And when do they know when to go? Nobody raises their hand, it's my turn to rap. Nobody does that. Nobody says, can I dance next? How do these kids know when to go? And then you could have rappers or dancers who don't know each other. And they just know when to go. They know who is next. How do they know that? That is social and emotional intelligence. And then you have to listen. You can't just go into the rap and you're whack. Or you can't go into the rap and repeat what the last person said and it not be better and a better iteration of what they just said. So you have to listen. This is drawing on social and emotional intelligence. Or traditional schools, the morning meetings. We have kids in a circle, and we say to a child, what did you do last night? Before you even say, what did, all the hands go up. And you're saying, I didn't ask you a question yet. So all the hands are up, and the kids, just can't wait to be next. And then you call on them, and they forget. And then they look at you like you gave them a hard question. They're not listening. They're not invested in that activity. So we call that social emotional learning. That is not social emotional learning. A cipher is social and emotional learning. I am feeding off you. I am listening to you. I am engaging with you, and then I go. Let's take the next, grit. That's funny. Grit? You want to talk about grit? Hip hop is grit. African and African American genius, resiliency, resolve, that is grit. I am standing here today because people were gritty, that I could be here. So when you want to talk about grit, you cannot talk about grit without talking about African and African Americans and hip hop. Think about what hip hop is 40 years ago. You have people we have Reaganomics, post-industrial New York, and they take something and make a cultural phenomenon that has lasted the last 40 years and become a billion-dollar global industry. I think that's grit. Let's take the last one. Let's take social and emotional intelligence. Now let's move to the notion to improv. So in 2012, the Institute for Deafness and Other Communication Disorders, they hooked up 12 freestyle rappers. And freestyle is the ability to just spontaneously create rhymes in real time. So they hooked these rappers up and they wanted to understand their brain activity. And what they found was amazing. These freestyle rappers' prefrontal cortex was moving at amazing speeds. And what is your prefrontal cortex? It's where emotion, motivation, and language is developed. So when you want to talk about the ability to be creative, the crux of that is the ability to improv, to come up with real thoughts just like this. That's hip hop. And so we have kids sitting in classrooms every single day with the ability to do this. And because we don't identify with hip hop, we don't like hip hop has been co-opted and commercialized as something that's so watered down now, and the rich and robust history of hip hop is lost that we say, that's not academic. But you think about the root of it. We have kids in our classrooms who have the very things that we say are predictors of success, and we ask them to turn it off. You have students sitting in ciphers, learning from each other, understanding each other, listening to each other, and we ask them to turn it off. Now, there's a school in Atlanta, Georgia called the Condesi School. Last year, the Condesi School was had the highest performing fifth grade class on the standardized test. Now, I'm not one for standardized tests, but they were the highest performing fifth grade class. And what makes this school so innovative is that at this school, we put students' culture first. The ways in which they want to learn, their identities, their hip hop identity is first, and we are seeing nothing but results. Also, we believe in small classes. And then the principles of this school are love. That's our first principle. When do you hear that in a school? Love, integrity, perseverance. These are the principles of a school that gets results because you got to put these things first. Love. And our students are succeeding. And this is also where I teach my hip hop class. And so for my hip hop class, we bring DJs in to talk about sound energy. We bring B-boys and B-girls, break dancers in to talk about physics and kinetic energy. And I'm watching my students understand that who they are, their hip hop identities are directly linked to schooling. And if students understand that who I am is academic, and I don't have to take my academics away when I enter the school day, when I enter the school doors, I can still be who I am and academic, we can see success. But we can only go so far. Grit, optimism, zest, the ability to improv, social and emotional intelligence, these are all predictors of success that I argue kids who identify with hip hop have. But it's not enough. It's not enough. February 26, 2012, Trayvon Martin showed grit. He showed resolve, social and emotional intelligence, and it wasn't enough. That night, he fought for his life. It wasn't enough. He read George Zimmerman. It wasn't enough. So when we have kids in our classroom who have it, we have to talk about racism, discrimination, bigotry, and hate. We can't just say, hey, you're gritty. All right, you're gonna make it. And not talk to that student about how that door may close. And not have a conversation with society as to why we're closing that door. Now, I don't think any teacher is George Zimmerman. But I do think when we deny students the opportunity to express their culture in classrooms, we are spirit murdering them. When I am asking you every day to walk through that door and be something that you are not, I am murdering your spirit. When I am asking you to stop being who you are so I can do my job, I am taking away something from you. And I am murdering your spirit piece by piece. And if you don't think this is right, if you don't say, that's a little much, Dr. Love, school to prison pipeline. We have students who are not dropping out of school, they're being pushed out of school. We have a disproportionate amount of African American boys in special education. Something is going on. And each one of those kids that are pushed into the criminal justice system, each one of those kids that are pushed in special education, each one of those kids that are pushed out of school, we have murdered their spirits. And so I leave you with this. These kids are bright. They got it. If you want to talk about what success means, predictors of success, who can do this, who are ready for this, I got a group of kids ready. But until we take the hand off of their backs that is holding them down, called racism, bigotry, and hate, they will not be able to rise. Thank you.